The crash of shattering glass jolted Merritt Caldwell from his fitful sleep. His eyes snapped open in the darkness, heart hammering against his ribs. Another sound followed, a soft thud from downstairs. Someone was in his house. Merritt reached for his phone on the nightstand, only to knock it to the floor where it slid under the bed, well beyond his reach. He glanced at the emergency call button mounted on the wall, 15 impossible feet away. 3 years in a wheelchair had taught him the cruel mathematics of distance. "Damn it," he whispered, maneuvering his wheelchair closer to the bed. The specialized electric chair responded with its familiar soft hum. At 58, Merritt's upper body remained strong, a testament to his former life as a sailing enthusiast before the accident that had severed his spinal cord and his connection to the world in one catastrophic moment. Get ready. You think you know where this story is going? But trust me, you don't. Let us know where you're listening from in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Another noise echoed through the vast Newport mansion. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. His security system should have alerted the police by now, but the storm battering Rhode Island's coast had knocked out power twice already tonight. Merritt cursed himself for not having the backup generator upgraded. He maneuvered toward the bedroom door, intending to lock it, when the chair jerked to a stop. The battery indicator flashed red. Dead. Of all the nights for the charging dock to malfunction, Merritt was stranded in the middle of his bedroom, a man who had revolutionized cybersecurity software now unable to secure his own safety. The footsteps grew closer. Second floor, now. Merritt's mind raced through options, none of them good. His staff, reduced to a house manager, a cook, and a maid since he'd driven everyone else away with his bitterness, all lived in the guest house, too far to hear him shout. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, then paused. Merritt held his breath, reaching for the letter opener on his nightstand. A ridiculous weapon, but better than nothing. The hallway floorboards creaked. Someone was approaching his door. Merritt had faced corporate takeovers and ruthless competitors, but never felt as vulnerable as he did now, trapped in a useless chair as the doorknob to his bedroom slowly turned. The door swung open, revealing a slender silhouette. "Mr. Caldwell?" The voice was soft, accented. Linnea Frost, his maid. Relief flooded through him, immediately replaced by embarrassment and then irritation. "What are you doing in my house at this hour?" he demanded, his voice harsher than intended. Linnea stepped into the room, a flashlight beam wavering in her hand. "The storm, sir. Knox sent me to check the windows. The weather alert said it's getting worse." Her voice remained even, unfazed by his tone. "I heard a crash. One of the library windows broke. I've covered it temporarily." At 34, Linnea had worked for him for 8 months, yet Merritt realized he'd barely looked at her before. She moved through his home like a ghost, efficient and invisible by design. His design, as he preferred minimal interaction with the staff who witnessed his daily struggles. "My chair's battery died," he admitted grudgingly, "and my phone is under the bed." Linnea nodded and retrieved his phone without comment. She moved behind his chair, released the electronic brake, and began pushing him toward the charging station. "I can manage now," Merritt said stiffly, hating being pushed like an invalid. "The power is out, sir. The charging station won't work until it returns." Her pragmatic observation silenced him. "Do you want me to get your backup manual chair from the closet?" Merritt nodded reluctantly. He watched as she efficiently assembled the lightweight wheelchair he despised using. It represented dependence in a way the high-tech chair with its buttons and controls somehow didn't. Once transferred to the manual chair, Merritt felt a need to reassert control. "You should return to the guest house now. Knox can handle any other issues." Linnea hesitated. "Knox took sleeping pills. The thunder keeps him awake." She paused, then added, "And the library needs attention. The rain is coming in." Merritt sighed. "Fine. I'll come assess the damage." Navigating the mansion's grand hallways in the manual chair required Linnea's assistance with the heavier doors. Each time she helped, Merritt felt his pride crumble further. By the time they reached the library, his mood had darkened considerably. The library had always been his sanctuary, 3 walls of books rising to the ceiling, the fourth dominated by windows overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, now a churning black mass beyond the rain-lashed glass. One of those windows had a jagged hole, around which Linnea had taped plastic sheeting. Wind whistled through the makeshift repair. "A branch broke through," she explained, gesturing to a tree limb on the expensive Persian carpet. "I've cleaned up most of the glass, but please be careful." Merritt wheeled himself to his desk, trying to ignore the water damage to the antique wood. The room felt different, violated by the storm's intrusion. Like his body after the accident, his sanctuary was now broken. "Well, this is fitting," he said bitterly. "Even the house is falling apart." Linnea said nothing, continuing to mop up water. Her silence irritated him further. "Don't you ever speak unless spoken to?" he snapped. She paused, water dripping from the cloth in her hand. "I speak when I have something to say, Mr. Caldwell." The simple dignity in her response made him feel small. Merritt turned away, wheeling himself to the window to examine the damage. His chair caught on the edge of the carpet, tilting precariously. He felt himself sliding sideways, unable to catch his balance. Before he could fall, Linnea was there, steadying the chair with surprising strength. "Careful," she said, her face close to his. For the first time, he noticed her eyes, clear gray, intelligent, and guarded. "I don't need your help," he said, the lie obvious to them both. "Of course not, sir." She straightened up. "But sometimes we all need help, whether we admit it or not." A tremendous crack of thunder shook the house, and the temporary repair over the window tore free. Rain and wind gusted in. Linnea rushed to fix it, struggling against the elements. Without thinking, Merritt wheeled over and held the plastic sheet in place while she secured it again. Working together in the storm-tossed darkness, something shifted between them. Not friendship, not even understanding, but an acknowledgement of shared purpose. When the window was secured, they both sat back, breathing hard from the effort. Rainwater had soaked them both. "You should get dry clothes," Merritt said, suddenly aware of how cold the room had become. "After I finish here," she replied, wringing water from her sleeve. "The room can wait. You'll catch pneumonia." Linnea looked surprised at his concern. "As you wish, Mr. Caldwell." As she turned to leave, a violent gust rattled the windows. Linnea stumbled, catching herself against a bookshelf. Several books tumbled down, one falling open to reveal papers hidden inside. Photographs slid across the floor. Pictures Merritt had hidden years ago. Before he could react, Linnea had scooped them up. She paused, her eyes catching on a photo of Merritt standing tall on the deck of a sailboat, laughing into the wind, his arm around a woman. "Claire," Merritt said, the name painful in his mouth. "My wife. Ex-wife now." Linnea handed him the photos without comment, but her eyes held a question. "She left 6 months after the accident," he said, surprising himself by offering this information. "Said she married an adventurer, not a man who needed help showering." "I'm sorry," Linnea said simply. "Don't be. I drove her away, just like I drove away my son, my friends. Turns out people don't enjoy being around constant bitterness." Merritt didn't know why he was saying these things he hadn't admitted aloud to anyone. Linnea carefully replaced the books on the shelf. "Bitterness is easier than grief," she said quietly. "Anger feels stronger than sadness." The insight startled him. "And what would you know about it?" She met his gaze directly. "Everyone has lost something, Mr. Caldwell. Some losses are just more visible than others." Before he could respond, the lights flickered back on. The sudden brightness made them both blink. The moment of unexpected connection broke. "I should check the rest of the house," Linnea said, retreating back into her professional role. "Your electric chair should charge now." "Wait," Merritt called as she reached the door. "How did you get into the main house tonight? The connecting passage is locked after dinner." A faint smile touched her lips. "I have keys, Mr. Caldwell, for emergencies." "And you just decided this was an emergency?" "The storm warning said 100-mile winds. I noticed your bedroom window was still open this afternoon." She hesitated. "I worried you might not hear the storm alerts with your medication." The implication that she'd been watching out for him, monitoring his routines, his medications, sent an odd feeling through Merritt. For 3 years, he'd been defined by what he couldn't do. The idea that someone had quietly been ensuring his safety without acknowledgement or thanks made him deeply uncomfortable. "Thank you," he said stiffly, the words rusty from disuse. Linnea nodded, her expression unreadable. "Good night, Mr. Caldwell." As she disappeared into the hallway, Merritt wheeled himself back to the window. The storm continued its assault, but the repaired window held. Beyond the glass, the darkness was absolute. The power outage had affected the entire coastline. For the first time in months, Merritt wondered about the woman who cleaned his home, where she came from, what had brought her here, what she thought as she moved silently through the rooms of his self-imposed prison. 8 months, and tonight was the first real conversation they'd had. The wind howled outside, but inside, something long dormant in Merritt Caldwell had awakened. Curiosity about someone other than himself. Morning light streamed through the repaired library window as Merritt wheeled himself into the room. The storm had passed, leaving behind a brilliant blue sky that mocked the chaos of the previous night. Glass had been swept away, the broken window properly boarded up, and the fallen branch removed. Even the water damage on his desk had been treated, the wood gleaming under a coat of polish. Merritt ran his hand over the smooth surface, surprised by the thoroughness of the cleanup. He'd expected to find a mess, not this immaculate restoration. A note sat in the center of the desk, written in neat, precise handwriting. "Window repair company scheduled for 2 p.m. today. Called book restorer about water damage to first editions. Coffee and breakfast in the sunroom. Linnea." He stared at the note longer than necessary. In the harsh light of day, his midnight conversation with his maid seemed like a strange dream. Had he really revealed so much about Claire? About his bitterness? Merritt shook his head, irritated with himself. The storm, the power outage, the vulnerability of being trapped in his manual wheelchair, all had conspired to lower his guard. His electric wheelchair, now fully charged, hummed softly as he made his way to the sunroom. Knox, his house manager, was already there, arranging the morning newspaper beside a covered breakfast tray. "Good morning, sir," Knox said, his voice formal as always. At 62, Knox had managed the Caldwell estate for over 20 years, serving first Merritt's parents and then Merritt himself. His loyalty had never wavered, even when Merritt's accident transformed both the household and his employer's temperament. "The storm did some damage," Merritt said, wheeling himself to the table. "Yes, sir. Linnea informed me about the library window. She came in quite early to manage the cleanup." "Early? What time is it now?" "Nearly 10, sir. You overslept." Merritt frowned. His pain medication often disrupted his sleep cycle, but he rarely slept past 7. "Why didn't you wake me?" "Linnea suggested letting you rest after the night's excitement." Knox's expression remained neutral, but something in his tone made Merritt look up sharply. "Since when does the maid make decisions about my schedule?" "She merely suggested it, sir. I agreed it was sensible." Merritt lifted the cover from his breakfast tray. Eggs, toast, sliced fruit arranged exactly as he preferred. Even the coffee was prepared to his specific taste, strong with just a hint of cream. "Where is she now?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Taking inventory of the pantry with Mrs. Winters." Mrs. Winters was the cook, a no-nonsense woman who came in daily to prepare meals but didn't live on the property. Merritt ate in silence, his mind circling back to Linnea. 8 months of employing someone who moved through his home like a shadow, and he knew almost nothing about her. He'd hired her through an agency after his previous maid quit, approving her employment papers without much thought. Her references had been impeccable, her demands modest, and her work beyond reproach. Knox, he said finally. "What do you know about Linnea?" Knox paused in arranging Merritt's medications. "Miss Frost? She's quite efficient. Never complains even when the work goes beyond her stated duties." "That's not what I meant. What do you know about her background?" "Very little, sir. She's private. I believe she's from somewhere in Europe. Germany, perhaps, or Switzerland. She sends money home regularly, though she never discusses family." The confirmation of her European background triggered Merritt's memory of the previous night. "Does she speak German?" Knox looked mildly surprised. "I wouldn't know, sir. Our conversations are limited to household matters." After breakfast, Merritt retreated to his home office, ostensibly to check emails, but actually to satisfy his growing curiosity. As the founder of CyberShield Solutions, one of the leading cybersecurity firms in the country, he had resources and connections that could uncover information about anyone. It felt invasive to investigate an employee this way, but something about Linnea's calm self-possession nagged at him. An hour later, Merritt sat back in his wheelchair, staring at his computer screen with a furrowed brow. The basic background check the agency had run before her employment showed nothing unusual. Linnea Frost, age 34, legal resident with a work visa, no criminal record. But when he dug deeper, inconsistencies emerged. Her work history before coming to America 5 years ago was vague. References checked out but seemed carefully curated. Most interesting was a gap in her documented history, a 3-year period that coincided with her arrival in the United States. On impulse, Merritt typed Linnea Frost, Germany into a search engine. Nothing relevant appeared. He tried variations, then switched to academic databases his company subscribed to. Still nothing. A knock at the door interrupted his search. "Come in," he called, quickly closing his browser tabs. Linnea entered, carrying a stack of mail. "Your correspondence, Mr. Caldwell." She placed the letters neatly on his desk, then stepped back, hands clasped in front of her simple gray dress. Her blonde hair was pulled back in its usual practical knot, her face composed and professional. "Thank you for handling the library cleanup," Merritt said, studying her with new interest. "Just doing my job, sir." Her accent was subtle but present. Definitely European, but difficult to place precisely. Merritt decided on a direct approach. "You're German, aren't you?" A flicker of surprise crossed her face before her expression smoothed again. "Yes, sir." "You never mentioned it." "You never asked." The response was simple but held a hint of challenge. "Fair enough," Merritt conceded. "How long have you been in America?" 5 years. Her answers remained short, revealing nothing beyond what was specifically asked. "And before that?" Linnea's posture tensed slightly. "Is there a problem with my work, Mr. Caldwell?" "Not at all. I'm simply curious about the woman who's been working in my home for 8 months. I'm afraid I'm not very interesting." She glanced toward the door, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. "I think that's untrue," Merritt said, rolling his wheelchair around the desk until he faced her directly. "Last night, you seemed to understand quite a bit about bitterness and loss. Those insights come from experience, not observation." Linnea's gray eyes met his, cool and assessing. "Everyone has experiences, Mr. Caldwell." "Indeed. And yours led you from Germany to working as a maid in Newport. That's quite a journey." A faint smile touched her lips. Not everyone has the luxury of living the life they planned. The phrase struck Merritt with unexpected force. He thought of his own life before the accident, the sailing competitions, the business triumphs, the social calendar filled with friends who had gradually disappeared during his long recovery. Not everyone has the luxury of living the life they planned. How true that was. Their conversation was interrupted by Knox appearing at the door. "Sir, the window repair company is here. They need access to the library." "Of course." Merritt nodded, and Linnea took the opportunity to slip out of the room behind Knox. Throughout the afternoon, Merritt found himself watching Linnea as she moved efficiently through her tasks. He noticed details he'd previously overlooked: the careful way she handled his books, her habit of quietly humming classical music when she thought no one was listening, how she always placed fresh flowers in the main rooms of the house, small touches that went beyond mere duty. By evening, Merritt had made a decision. After dinner, he asked Knox to send Linnea to his study. She arrived promptly, her expression guarded. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Caldwell?" "Yes. Please sit down." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Linnea perched on the edge of the seat, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. She looked ready to flee at any moment. "I'm planning a business trip to Berlin next month," Merritt began, watching her reaction carefully. "CyberShield is expanding its European operations, and I need to meet with potential partners there." A slight widening of her eyes was the only indication that the mention of Berlin affected her. "Normally, Knox would accompany me, but he's scheduled for knee surgery around that time." This was a lie. Knox's surgery was still months away, but Merritt needed the excuse. "I'll need an assistant who speaks German and can help me navigate both the language and my physical limitations." He gestured to his wheelchair. "I see," Linnea said cautiously. "I'd like you to come with me." "Me?" Genuine surprise broke through her composed facade. "Sir, I'm a housekeeper, not a business assistant." "You're organized, efficient, and you speak the language. Those are the primary qualifications I need." Merritt leaned forward slightly. The position would include a substantial increase in salary, of course. 3 weeks in Berlin, all expenses paid, helping me with meetings and translations. Linnea was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight with controlled emotion. "Why are you really asking me, Mr. Caldwell? You could hire a professional translator, someone with business experience." Merritt considered lying, then decided against it. "Because I'm curious about you, Miss Frost. About why a woman who clearly has education and intelligence is working as a maid. About what you're hiding from." Anger flashed in her eyes. "My past is my own business." "As is mine," Merritt countered. "Yet you know intimate details about my medications, my divorce, my estrangement from my son. The balance of knowledge between us is uneven, and I dislike disadvantages. So this is about power? About uncovering my secrets?" "No," Merritt said, surprising himself with his honesty. "It's about connection. For the first time in 3 years, I'm genuinely interested in someone else's story." The admission hung in the air between them. Linnea studied him, her expression softening slightly. "I don't know if returning to Berlin is a good idea," she said finally. "Which means there are reasons you left in the first place." Merritt nodded. "All the more intriguing." "This isn't a game, Mr. Caldwell. I'm well aware. Few things have felt less like a game than the past 3 years of my life." He wheeled himself to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. "I'm offering you an opportunity, increased pay, travel, a change of duties. You're free to refuse." Linnea stood up. "May I have time to consider it?" "Of course. The trip is still 4 weeks away." Merritt turned back to face her. "But I should warn you that my curiosity won't diminish if you decline. I'll simply find other ways to satisfy it." "Is that a threat?" "An observation. I built a technology empire by pursuing answers to questions that interested me. Old habits die hard." A complex emotion crossed Linnea's face, something between resignation and challenge. "I'll give you my answer tomorrow." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Whatever you think you might discover about me, Mr. Caldwell, I promise you this: it won't be what you expect." After she left, Merritt sat in the quiet of his study, replaying their conversation. He'd approached it like a business negotiation, but it had felt more personal than any interaction he'd had since the accident. Whether Linnea accepted his offer or not, something had already changed. The walls of isolation he'd built around himself had developed a crack, letting in a sliver of light, and with it, the uncomfortable warmth of human connection. His phone rang, the screen displaying a name he rarely saw anymore: Cormac Caldwell, his son. Merritt stared at it, his finger hovering over the answer button. After 5 rings, the call went to voicemail. The familiar mix of relief and regret washed over him. Some connections were harder to repair than others. Outside his window, the last traces of sunset faded from the sky. In the guest house beyond the garden, a light glowed in Linnea's window. Merritt wondered what she was thinking, whether she was packing to leave or considering his offer. Either way, the predictable routine of his carefully controlled life had been disrupted. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring. "Welcome to Berlin, Mr. Caldwell." The hotel manager bowed slightly as he handed over the keycards to their adjoining suites. "We've prepared everything according to your specifications. The rooms are fully accessible." Merritt nodded his thanks, aware of Linnea standing quietly beside him. They had barely spoken during the long flight from Boston, her responses to his questions polite, but minimal. She had accepted his job offer with unexpected directness the morning after their conversation, walking into his study simply saying, "I'll go to Berlin with you," then returning to her duties before he could respond. The 4 weeks of preparation had transformed their relationship into something professional but strained. Linnea had moved from the guest house into one of the mansion's spare bedrooms to train with Knox, learning Merritt's business routines and requirements. She'd proven remarkably quick to adapt, absorbing information about his medical needs, dietary restrictions, and corporate contacts with quiet efficiency. Yet, despite their constant proximity, she remained as enigmatic as ever, deflecting personal questions with practiced ease. The more skilled she became at attending to his needs, the more distance she created between them. Now, in Berlin, that distance seemed to waver. As they entered the elevator to their floor, Merritt noticed Linnea's hands trembling slightly as she held their itinerary. Her normally composed expression had cracks of anxiety showing through. "First time back since you left?" he asked quietly. She glanced at him, then back at the rising floor numbers. "Yes." "Difficult?" A small, tight smile. "You have no idea." The elevator doors opened, and Merritt wheeled himself into the hallway, allowing her this small reprieve from conversation. Whatever her history with Berlin, it clearly affected her deeply. His curiosity burned stronger than ever, but he found himself reluctant to push. Her distress seemed genuine, not a performance designed to deflect his interest. Their suites were luxurious, with wide doorways and specially adapted bathrooms for Merritt's wheelchair. Large windows overlooked the Tiergarten, Berlin's central park, its autumn trees blazing with color. While the hotel staff delivered their luggage, Linnea moved through the rooms, checking details with professional thoroughness. "Your first meeting isn't until tomorrow morning," she said, consulting the schedule on her tablet. "Would you like to rest, or would you prefer dinner?" Merritt studied her, noting the careful way she avoided looking directly out the windows at the city beyond. "Neither. I want to go out." Surprise registered on her face. "Out? But you must be tired from the journey." "I've spent enough time resting. I want to see Berlin." He moved his wheelchair toward the door. "You're my guide, after all." "I'm not a tour guide," she protested. "Then we'll discover the city together. The fresh air will do us both good." 20 minutes later, they were moving along a path in the Tiergarten, Merritt's wheelchair handling the smooth pavement with ease. The late afternoon sun filtered through golden leaves, and the air held the crisp edge of approaching winter. Around them, Berliners jogged, walked dogs, or sat on benches enjoying the last warm days of the season. Linnea walked beside him, her steps measured to match his pace. Her tension seemed to ease slightly in the open space, away from the confines of the hotel. "You lived here before?" Merritt asked, keeping his tone conversational. She nodded. "For several years." "What brought you to Berlin originally?" A pause, then, "I came to study. At Heidelberg first, then I transferred to Humboldt University here in Berlin." It was the most personal information she had volunteered since their journey began. Encouraged, Merritt continued, "What did you study?" "Literature. Specifically, German literary resistance during World War II." That's unexpected. A genuine smile flickered across her face. Why? Because maids shouldn't have academic interests? Because it's so specific, Merritt clarified. Most literature students I've known focused on broader periods or movements. Linnea's pace slowed as they approached a small bridge over a pond. I was interested in how writers use their work to resist totalitarianism, often in coded ways that seemed innocuous to censors, but carried powerful messages to those who knew how to read between the lines. She leaned against the bridge railing, looking down at the water. Words have power, even when they appear harmless on the surface. Merritt wheeled up beside her. Like people. She met his gaze directly, exactly like people. They continued through the park in comfortable silence until they reached the Brandenburg Gate, illuminated against the darkening sky. The historic landmark was crowded with tourists taking photos. "Would you like a picture, sir?" Linnea asked, gesturing to the iconic gate. "Only if you're in it too," Merritt replied. "And drop the sir. We're thousands of miles from home and you're no longer cleaning my library." Her eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded. "All right, Merritt." His name in her voice sounded strange, intimate. A German tourist offered to take their photo, and Linnea stood somewhat awkwardly beside Merritt's wheelchair as the man snapped several pictures with Merritt's phone. Looking at the images afterward, Merritt was struck by how they appeared. Not employer and employee, but perhaps friends or even family members enjoying a trip together. The thought was unsettling in its appeal. They found a restaurant nearby, a cozy place with outdoor heating that allowed them to sit on the patio despite the cool evening. Linnea ordered for them both in fluent German, her accent flawless to Merritt's untrained ear. The waiter responded with familiar warmth, and they exchanged several sentences that made Linnea laugh, a sound Merritt realized he had never heard before. "What did he say?" Merritt asked after the waiter left. "He said American tourists usually order the worst beer on the menu, but that I had saved you from that fate." She smiled, relaxed for the first time since their arrival. "I told him you were too sophisticated for typical tourist mistakes." "High praise indeed," Merritt said dryly, though entirely unearned. "My beer knowledge begins and ends with whatever is served at Red Sox games." Their food arrived, hearty German dishes paired with local beer that was indeed far better than anything Merritt had tasted at Fenway Park. As they ate, Linnea gradually opened up about her student days in Berlin, describing favorite cafes, bookshops, and hidden corners of the city where she used to read or write. "You sound like you loved it here," Merritt observed. "Why leave?" The question landed like a stone in still water, ripples of tension spreading across Linnea's features. She set down her fork, appetite apparently gone. Some places hold too many memories to remain comfortable. Bad memories? Complicated ones. She took a sip of water, clearly struggling with how much to reveal. "I had professional setbacks and personal ones. They happened simultaneously, which made both harder to bear." Merritt waited, sensing there was more she wanted to say. "I was engaged," she continued finally, "to my academic mentor at the university. When my career fell apart, so did the relationship. Or perhaps it was the other way around." She looked away, her profile sharp against the city lights. "Either way, Berlin became a place I needed to escape." "I'm sorry," Merritt said, meaning it. "That sounds incredibly difficult." Linnea shrugged, a deliberately casual gesture that didn't match the shadow in her eyes. "Life goes on, as you know better than most." Their conversation drifted to safer topics as they finished their meal. By the time they returned to the hotel, the odd intimacy of the evening had faded, replaced by their more familiar professional dynamic. Linnea reviewed the next day's schedule with him, confirmed his medication regimen, and reminded him of the names of the German executives they would be meeting. "The first meeting is at 9, she said, standing in the doorway between their suites. "I'll wake you at 7. "Thank you, Linnea, for tonight as well. I enjoyed seeing the city with you." She nodded, her expression unreadable. Good night, Mr. Caldwell. Back to Mr. Caldwell already? He asked lightly. A small smile touched her lips. Best to maintain proper boundaries. Tomorrow we have business to conduct. After she closed the door, Merritt sat for a long time looking out at the Berlin skyline. She was right about boundaries, of course. Whatever curiosity had driven him to bring her to Berlin, whatever connection had begun to form between them, it shouldn't progress further. He was her employer, 24 years her senior, damaged in body and spirit. The very fact that he found her intriguing was reason enough to maintain distance. Yet, as he prepared for bed, he couldn't help wondering about the fiancé she had mentioned, the academic mentor whose betrayal had driven her from a city she clearly loved. What kind of man would hurt someone like Linnea, with her quiet strength and dignity? And what professional setbacks had coincided with her personal loss? Sleep came fitfully, his mind still turning over these questions. The business meetings the next day went remarkably well. Linnea proved to be an exceptional translator and assistant, anticipating Merritt's needs and smoothing over cultural differences with practiced ease. The German executives were impressed by her fluency and professionalism, and equally impressed by Merritt's innovative security solutions. By late afternoon, they had secured a tentative agreement for CyberShield to provide security services for a major German banking consortium. Linnea's translation skills had been crucial during the technical discussions, where precise language mattered enormously. "You were outstanding today," Merritt told her as they left the banking headquarters. "Where did you learn all that technical vocabulary? I know that wasn't part of your literature studies." Linnea adjusted her scarf against the chilly wind. "I did some translation work after my academic career ended. Technical documents mostly, to pay the bills while I figured out what to do next." "You have a remarkable ability to adapt," Merritt observed. "Necessity teaches quickly." Her tone was matter-of-fact, without self-pity. Their next stop was a formal dinner at an upscale restaurant, where they would meet with university officials interested in implementing CyberShield security protocols across their campus network. The restaurant was elegant, with crystal chandeliers and white-clothed tables spaced for privacy. Linnea helped Merritt navigate the tight spaces between tables, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder as she guided his wheelchair to their reserved table. The German hosts stood to greet them, introductions were made, and conversation began to flow with the wine. Merritt was explaining a particular security feature when he noticed Linnea's sudden stillness beside him. Following her gaze across the restaurant, he saw a tall, distinguished man with silver hair at his temples being seated at a distant table. "Linnea?" Merritt murmured, concerned by her pallor. She blinked, turning back to him with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sorry, Mr. Caldwell. You were discussing the encryption protocols?" He continued his explanation but kept a watchful eye on her. Throughout the meal, she repeatedly glanced at the silver-haired man, who remained absorbed in his own dinner companion and hadn't noticed them. When their hosts excused themselves briefly to take a call, Merritt leaned toward her. "Who is he?" "Who?" she asked, though they both knew exactly who he meant. "The man you've been watching all evening. The one who's clearly upset you." Linnea took a careful sip of water. "Professor Dashiell Harrington, my former mentor and fiancé." Merritt studied the man with new interest. Professor Harrington appeared to be in his late 40s, expensively dressed with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to respect. "Should we leave?" "No," Linnea said firmly. "I won't run away. Not again." Their hosts returned and the business discussion resumed. Linnea participated seamlessly, her voice steady despite the tension evident in her shoulders. Merritt found himself increasingly impressed by her composure under pressure. As the dinner concluded and they prepared to leave, disaster struck. Professor Harrington, heading toward the exit, looked directly at their table and froze. Recognition flooded his face, followed by open shock. "Linnea?" His voice carried clearly across the intervening space. "Linnea Frost?" The restaurant seemed to still around them. Linnea rose slowly from her chair, her knuckles white where they gripped the tablecloth. "Hello, Dashiell?" Harrington approached their table, his initial shock giving way to a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "This is extraordinary. 5 years without a word, and here you are." He turned to Merritt and the German officials with the smooth charm of an experienced academic. "Forgive the interruption, gentlemen. Linnea is a former student of mine, one who disappeared rather dramatically." "Former colleague," Linnea corrected, her voice tight. "And former fiancé." Of course. Harrington's smile remained fixed. "Such ancient history now." He extended his hand to Merritt. "Professor Dashiell Harrington, Department of German Literature, Humboldt University. And you are?" "Merritt Caldwell, Cybershield Solutions." Merritt shook the offered hand, noting the professor's firm grip. A power move, asserting dominance. "Linnea is my executive assistant. Her German expertise has been invaluable." Harrington's eyebrows rose. "Executive assistant? How unexpected." Linnea was once the department's rising star, brilliant research on wartime literary resistance. Before her, difficulties. The deliberate vagueness of difficulties hung in the air like poison. Linnea's face had gone completely blank, a defensive emptiness that concerned Merritt more than any visible distress might have. "Professor Harrington," she said with brittle politeness, "we're concluding a business dinner. Perhaps another time." Of course. I wouldn't dream of interrupting." He reached into his jacket and produced a business card which he placed on the table. "My contact information should you wish to reconnect during your stay. I've continued the research we began together. It's generated quite a bit of interest in academic circles." The emphasis on "we" and "together" seemed significant, though Merritt couldn't decode the subtext. Linnea made no move to touch the card. "Good evening, gentlemen," Harrington said to the others at the table. "Miss Frost." With a final nod, he departed, leaving a charged silence behind him. The German officials, sensing the tension, made their excuses shortly after. As Merritt and Linnea left the restaurant, her silence felt heavy, oppressive. "Do you want to talk about it?" Merritt asked as they settled into the hired car. "No." The word was clipped, final. "Linnea." "Please, Mr. Caldwell." Her voice cracked slightly. "Not now." They returned to the hotel in silence. In the elevator, Linnea stared fixedly at the control panel, her breathing carefully measured as though she was holding herself together through sheer will. When they reached their floor, Merritt spoke again. "If you want to return to Newport, I'll understand. Seeing him clearly upset you." She shook her head. "I won't run away again. I can't." "Then at least tell me what happened between you two. What did he mean by difficulties?" Linnea's hand trembled as she unlocked her suite door. "Good night, Mr. Caldwell." The door closed firmly behind her, leaving Merritt alone in the hallway. Through the heavy wood, he thought he heard a muffled sob, but he couldn't be certain. Back in his own suite, Merritt sat in the darkness, looking out at the city lights. The dinner's business success felt hollow compared to the human drama that had unfolded. His curiosity about Linnea's past had transformed into something deeper, genuine concern for her well-being. On impulse, he opened his laptop and typed "Professor Dashiell Harrington, Humboldt University" into a search engine. Results appeared immediately. Academic papers, a university profile, interviews in scholarly journals. Harrington was clearly respected in his field, with an impressive publication record focused on German literary resistance during World War II, the exact topic Linnea had mentioned studying. One article in particular caught Merritt's attention. "Revolutionary Resistance: Coded Narratives in Wartime German Literature." The publication date was 4 years ago, shortly after Linnea would have left Berlin. The author, Professor Dashiell Harrington. Merritt downloaded the article and began to read, a growing uneasiness settling in his stomach. The writing was dense with academic jargon, but the core ideas shone through. Ideas about hidden meanings, coded language, and subtle subversion that echoed what Linnea had described in the park. By the time he finished reading, a disturbing theory had formed in his mind. If he was right, then Professor Harrington's difficulties comment took on a far darker meaning, and Linnea's escape from Berlin a far more painful context. Merritt closed his laptop, his decision made. Tomorrow, he would begin his own investigation into what had really happened 5 years ago, not out of mere curiosity now, but because Linnea Frost deserved more than to be haunted by whatever injustice had driven her from her homeland into hiding. Outside, Berlin slept beneath a blanket of city lights, its streets holding secrets both old and new. In the adjoining suite, Linnea faced her own shadows, unaware that her employer had just appointed himself her unexpected ally in confronting the past she'd tried so hard to leave behind. Morning light filtered through the curtains as Merritt finished his third cup of coffee. His laptop screen glowed with dozens of open tabs: academic journals, university press releases, social media profiles. He'd been awake since 4, driven by a growing certainty that something deeply wrong had happened to Linnea. A knock at the connecting door interrupted his research. Linnea entered, professionally dressed and composed, though the shadows under her eyes suggested she'd slept as poorly as he had. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell. You have a meeting with the software developers at 10. She placed a folder on the table beside him. "I've prepared notes on their previous questions." Merritt closed his laptop. "I've canceled today's meetings." Surprise registered on her face. "Canceled? But the developers have been preparing for weeks. Some things are more important than business." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, sit down." Linnea remained standing. "If this is about last night, it is, but not in the way you think." Merritt wheeled himself to the window, gathering his thoughts. 5 years ago, you were working on research about literary resistance during World War II, research that Professor Harrington eventually published under his own name. She went very still. "You've been investigating me." "Not you. Him." Merritt turned to face her. "Harrington published Revolutionary Resistance 4 years ago to significant acclaim. It established him as a leading authority in the field. But it wasn't his work, was it?" Linnea's hands trembled slightly. She pressed them against her skirt to hide the reaction. "What makes you think that?" "Because I've spent the night reading everything Harrington published before and after that paper. The writing styles are dramatically different. The earlier works are competent but unremarkable. Then suddenly, this brilliant, innovative analysis appears, with methodologies and perspectives he never used before or since." Merritt paused. "It was your research, wasn't it?" The silence stretched between them. Finally, Linnea sank into the chair, her composure cracking. "Yes. Tell me what happened." She took a deep breath. "I spent 3 years researching coded resistance in German literature, how writers embedded messages of defiance in seemingly innocent texts. I discovered patterns no one had identified before." For the first time, pride entered her voice. It was important work, showing how ordinary people resist oppression through creativity when direct opposition is too dangerous. "And Harrington stole it." Linnea nodded, her eyes distant with memory. "We were engaged. I trusted him completely. He was my mentor, my partner." She paused. "I was in a car accident. Nothing serious, but I was hospitalized for 2 weeks with a concussion. When I returned, I found he had submitted my research under his name, claiming I had been collaborating with him but was now suffering from mental instability after the accident. And people believed him. He was a respected professor. I was a foreign student with a head injury." Bitterness edged her voice. "He had carefully laid groundwork while I was hospitalized, telling colleagues I'd been having episodes before the accident. By the time I recovered enough to understand what was happening, he'd turned everyone against me." Merritt felt a cold anger building inside him. "You must have tried to fight back." "Of course I did." Linnea's laugh held no humor. I went to the department head, the academic ethics committee, even the university president. But Daschle had protected himself well. My research notes were gone from our shared apartment. He claimed they never existed separately from his work. Without proof, it was my word against his. And then? Then I became the unstable, jealous student having a breakdown. The vengeful woman trying to ruin her ex-fiancé's career because he'd ended their relationship. She looked down at her hands. Eventually, the university suggested I take a leave of absence for my health. They were concerned about my well-being. So you left Germany altogether? Linnea nodded. I had nothing left. No career, no reputation, no future in academia. I came to America and started over with the only identity that seemed safe. Someone invisible. Someone no one would look at twice. Merritt thought of the efficient, silent maid who had moved through his home for months, carefully avoiding attention. It made perfect sense now. She had trained herself to disappear. What about your family? Couldn't they help? My father died when I was young. My mother lives in a small town outside Munich. She has health issues that require regular care. Linnea's voice softened. She knows nothing about what happened. She believes I moved to America for better opportunities. I send money home every month for her medical expenses. The selflessness of this struck Merritt deeply. While he had wallowed in self-pity after his accident, pushing away everyone who cared about him, Linnea had silently carried her burden while supporting others. Harrington needs to be held accountable, he said firmly. It's too late. There's no proof, and the academic world has accepted him as the authority on my research. She stood up. I've made peace with it, Mr. Caldwell. Seeing him was difficult, but it changes nothing. I disagree. Merritt opened his laptop again. While you were sleeping, I've been consulting with Larkin. Your attorney? The best intellectual property lawyer on the East Coast. He's been helping me gather information. Merritt gestured to the screen. Harrington made mistakes, Linnea. Big ones. She moved closer, curiosity overcoming her reluctance. What do you mean? First, the timing. Your accident and hospitalization are documented. There are medical records showing your condition, including the dates. Harrington submitted the complete research paper just 10 days after your accident, an impossibly short time to develop such complex work from scratch. But that's circumstantial. Second, Merritt continued, your early papers. I found 3 articles you published as a graduate student that contain preliminary versions of the theories developed in Harrington's paper. They establish your intellectual ownership of the core concepts before he ever wrote about them. Linnea's eyes widened. I didn't think anyone would connect those early papers to the final research. Most people wouldn't, but I didn't build a cybersecurity empire without learning how to follow digital trails. Merritt pulled up another document. Most damning of all, I found this. A conference program from 4 years ago where you were originally scheduled to present your research. Your name and presentation title are listed in the early program, which was published online before your accident. The final program shows Harrington presenting the same topic. Linnea sank back into the chair, staring at the evidence. I never saw that. By the time the conference happened, I was already on my leave of absence. There's more. Larkin has been in contact with 3 of your former classmates who remembered you discussing your research before the accident. They were reluctant to speak up before, but with evidence to support your claim, they're now willing to provide statements. Why? Linnea asked, her voice barely audible. Why would you do all this? Merritt considered the question seriously. At first, it was curiosity. Then it became about justice. But honestly, I think it's because for the first time since my accident, I found something more important than my own problems. He smiled slightly. You showed me that loss doesn't have to define us, that there are worse things than being in a wheelchair. Like being a fraud? Like allowing someone else to steal your voice. Their conversation was interrupted by Merritt's phone ringing. He answered, listened briefly, then hung up. Larkin's here. I asked him to fly in last night. Your attorney is in Berlin? Linnea looked stunned. I told you he's the best, and this is important. 20 minutes later, they sat in a conference room at the hotel with James Larkin, a sharp-eyed man in his 60s whose reputation for ruthless efficiency had served CyberShield well over the years. We have enough to establish prior claim, Larkin explained, spreading documents across the table. Ms. Frost's early publications, the conference program, the timing discrepancies and witness statements create a compelling case. But what we don't have is the original research itself. Your notes, drafts, data. They disappeared from our apartment while I was in the hospital, Linnea said. Larkin nodded. So you've said. But people like Harrington rarely destroy valuable materials. They hide them. You think he kept my research? Linnea looked skeptical. People who steal intellectual property are often insecure, Merritt explained. They keep the original work as a reference, afraid they might miss something important if they rely solely on memory. Exactly, Larkin agreed. And academic thieves in particular tend to be hoarders. They can't bear to destroy the original brilliance they're trying to claim. Linnea considered this. Even if you're right, how would we ever find it? It's been 5 years. By asking him directly, Merritt said. Today. Both Linnea and Larkin looked at him in surprise. I've arranged a meeting with Harrington at the Berlin State Library in 2 hours. He believes he's meeting with a potential American donor interested in funding his department. He'll never admit anything, Linnea protested. He won't have to. Merritt's expression was determined. Larkin will present him with the evidence we've gathered and explain the consequences. Academic censure, professional disgrace, potential legal action. Then we'll offer him a choice. What choice? Linnea asked. Reputation or truth. He can either publicly acknowledge that the research was yours, with all the humiliation that entails, or he can quietly provide us with your original materials and accept a position at a small university in California that's been quietly arranged, far from his prestigious Berlin post, but not career-ending. You've thought of everything, Linnea said, sounding impressed despite herself. That's what I do. Merritt checked his watch. We should prepare. 2 hours later, they sat in a private room at the Berlin State Library, surrounded by centuries of knowledge preserved in leather and paper. Merritt positioned his wheelchair at the head of the table, with Linnea and Larkin flanking him. When Harrington entered, his confident smile faltered at the sight of Linnea. What is this? He asked, recognition quickly turning to wariness. Please, sit down, Professor, Merritt said pleasantly. We have much to discuss about your academic contributions. What followed was one of the most masterful negotiations Merritt had ever witnessed. Larkin presented their evidence methodically, his tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. As each piece was laid out, Harrington's expression shifted from dismissive to concerned to increasingly desperate. This is absurd, he blustered when Larkin finished. These vague connections prove nothing. Perhaps not definitively, Merritt agreed, but they raise enough questions to warrant a formal investigation. One that would freeze your current research funding while your past work is scrutinized. Academic investigations are so time-consuming, aren't they? And public. Harrington's face paled. What do you want? The truth, Linnea said, speaking for the first time. My research, my notes, everything you took. I don't have. Please, Merritt interrupted. Don't insult our intelligence. You kept it. People like you always do. A tense silence filled the room. Finally, Harrington's shoulders sagged. It was years ago, a mistake. I was under pressure to publish groundbreaking work or lose my position. So you stole mine, Linnea said quietly. Work that represented years of my life. You were my student, my fiancé. We collaborated constantly. The ideas developed between us. Stop. Merritt's voice cut like steel. Here's what's going to happen. You will provide Ms. Frost with all of her original research materials. In return, we won't pursue public exposure or legal action. And my career? Harrington asked, the calculation visible in his eyes. North Coast College in California has an opening in their German department. Small school, limited research opportunities, but tenured. The position is yours if you want it. Far from here, with your reputation technically intact. Exile, Harrington said bitterly. Justice, Linnea corrected. More merciful than what you deserve. Harrington looked between them, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. The materials are in a storage unit. I can take you there now. 3 hours later, Linnea sat surrounded by boxes of papers, notebooks, and digital storage devices in her hotel suite. Her original research, thousands of pages of notes, drafts, and data, had been preserved exactly as she'd left it 5 years ago. As she carefully examined each piece, her eyes shone with a mixture of pain and vindication. Merritt watched from the doorway, giving her space to process the emotional reunion with her life's work. Eventually, she looked up, noticing him. "Thank you," she said simply. "I never thought I'd see these again." "What will you do with them now?" he asked. Linnea ran her fingers over a notebook filled with her handwriting. "Publish the truth, I suppose. Reclaim my research. The academic community will welcome it. Larkin has already spoken with several journal editors who are interested in the story." And Dashiell? On his way to California, thoroughly warned about the consequences of ever speaking ill of you again. Merritt wheeled himself into the room. "But there's something else we need to discuss." Linnea set down the notebook. "What's that?" "My son, Cormac. He called while you were organizing the materials." "Is everything all right?" Merritt sighed. "No, he's in the hospital in Newport. Overdose." Linnea's hand flew to her mouth. "I'm so sorry. Is he?" "He'll recover, physically at least. But it's serious." Merritt looked down at his hands. "I've been so focused on your past that I've been ignoring my present, my own family." "We should return to Newport immediately," Linnea said, already standing. "I'll make the arrangements." "No," Merritt shook his head. "I mean, yes, we need to return, but that's not what I wanted to discuss." He met her eyes directly. "These past weeks with you, watching you face your past, seeing your strength, it's changed how I see my own situation. For 3 years, I've been hiding in my house, pushing people away, wallowing in bitterness over what I lost." "Your injury was traumatic," Linnea said gently. "You can't compare." "I'm not comparing our situations. I'm saying you inspired me. You lost everything and still found a way to keep going, to care for your mother, to build a new life. Meanwhile, I've been using my wheelchair as an excuse to stop living." Linnea knelt beside his chair, bringing them to eye level. "That's not fair to yourself. Recovery isn't a competition." "Maybe not, but it is a choice. Every day we choose how to carry our burdens." Merritt gestured to the research materials surrounding them. "You carried yours with dignity, even when it meant becoming invisible. I carried mine with rage and self-pity, making myself the center of a story about loss instead of possibility. And now? Now I want to make different choices, starting with my son." Merritt took a deep breath. "And with you." "Me?" Linnea looked confused. "I don't want you to be my maid anymore, or my assistant." Her expression closed off, professional distance returning instantly. "I understand. After all this, you probably want a clean break from—" "No," Merritt interrupted, taking her hand. "That's not what I mean. I want to offer you a position with CyberShield, a real one, using your research skills and analytical abilities, or funding to publish your work independently, or both." He smiled slightly. "Basically, I want you to stop hiding who you really are." Linnea stared at him, processing his words. "You want me to work for you? In what capacity?" "That's up to you. Your research on hidden communication patterns has fascinating applications for cybersecurity. Or you could establish a foundation supporting academic integrity. or write the book you were meant to write 5 years ago. Merritt shrugged. The point is, you have choices now. Your life doesn't have to be defined by what Harrington took from you. Just as yours doesn't have to be defined by your accident, Linnea said softly, understanding dawning in her eyes. Exactly. Merritt squeezed her hand. We've both been trapped by our pasts. Maybe it's time we helped each other find our way forward. The next morning found them on a private jet heading back to Newport. Linnea had spent most of the night organizing her reclaimed research, while Merritt made arrangements for Cormac's care and recovery. Both were exhausted but energized by a sense of purpose neither had felt in years. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Linnea turned to Merritt. I've been thinking about your offer. And I'd like to establish a research division within CyberShield, focused on identifying communication patterns in digital security threats. My work on literary resistance has direct applications to how modern threats embed themselves in seemingly innocent code. Merritt smiled. Sounds like a perfect fit. There's more, Linnea continued. I want to use part of my salary to establish a scholarship for students fighting academic misconduct. People who stand up for intellectual integrity often face retaliation. They deserve support. We can do better than that, Merritt said. CyberShield will match your contribution and establish a formal foundation. We'll name it after you. Not after me? Linnea shook her head. After the principal, the Truth Matters Foundation. Perfect. Merritt extended his hand formally. Partners? Linnea took his hand, her grip firm and confident. Partners. The plane carried them eastward through clear skies, back to Newport, where Cormac waited in the hospital and the mansion stood on its cliff, both representing challenges to be faced. But for the first time in years, neither Merritt nor Linnea felt alone in confronting their futures. As the coastline of Rhode Island appeared below them, Merritt watched Linnea gazing out the window, her expression peaceful despite the journey ahead. Through helping her reclaim her past, he had found a way to reclaim his future. Sometimes, he reflected, the people who enter our lives as strangers become the ones who help us find our way home to ourselves. The plane began its descent, bringing them back to Newport, not to the lives they had left behind, but to new possibilities neither could have imagined just weeks before. Whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together. Two people who had learned that the deepest wounds can sometimes lead to the most profound healing.